Good day, goeiedag, fellow South Africans. And yep, nothing ever stays the same. In Parliament overnight, Australia passed a new visa for parents of Australian migrants. That'll be available in 2019. Now, for some, this will probably work really well for them, but for others, probably not so good. I'll just read to you what the legislation says, and you can talk to an immigration lawyer about it if you are a resident in Australia and you want to bring your parents out. Okay, the legislation that the visa was tied to has been passed by the federal parliament, paving the way for the new visa. However, the opposition and migrant groups are unhappy that the government's visa is significantly different from what was initially promised. Well, that's typical of politicians, isn't it? Okay, here's the actual visa for kids who want to bring their parents into Australia. The federal government has announced it will open applications for the much-awaited temporary sponsored visa for parents in the first half of the next year after the federal parliament finally passed the legislation tied to the visa. Now, the key operative word there is temporary. So it's not a permanent visa for parents. Federal Senate on Wednesday passed the Migration Amendments, Family Violence and Other Measures Bill 2016. I don't know where the violence comes into this, but anyway, I guess it's just putting everything together. With government's amendments, and it was subsequently passed by the lower house the same day, paving the way for rolling out the visa that the migrant communities have been demanding for many years. The new visa will help families reunite and spend time together, Immigration Minister David Coleman said in a statement. It will provide a new pathway for parents and grandparents to visit their families in Australia, which will deliver great social benefits to the Australian community, he added. So I think what they're saying in effect is that it's like a fast track. If you've been waiting for the other parental visa, this is like a fast track where you can bring your parents and grandparents over. However, Mr. Coleman took aim at the Labour Party that opposed the government's amendments to the legislation after it initially voted in favour of it. He said, "It is astounding that the Labour Party voted against this important legislation. Bill Shorten needs to explain to communities why he instructed the senators to stand in the way of this reform," the immigration minister said. And this goes on to say, Labour sources, however, maintain that the party was only opposed to the amendments to the legislation regarding debt recovery powers that the party was concerned about. And this is really where the issue comes in, because this never used to be under the old parental visa. Shadow Immigration Minister Shane Newman said the government should deliver the visa that it had promised before the 2016 federal election, and not the revised version that included several conditions that were not part of the promised visa when announced, including limiting the visa to one set of parents per household. Conditions like that would force families to choose which parents or in-laws they reunite with. Labour has previously written to the new Immigration Minister, David Coleman, expressing these concerns and their impacts, Mr. Newman said. So what they're saying is if you and your wife live at a certain address and you both have families in South Africa, only one of them can come across. Now, an option, a very, very unhappy option, would be for those two parties to separate, and then as they live in different addresses, they could then invite their respective families over. This is just crazy shit that they've got here. Okay, the promised visa. Migrant communities ran a campaign for a special visa for their parents, and during the run-up to the last federal election, The then Turnbull government promised a sponsored parent visa that would allow parents of migrants to live in Australia for a continuous period of up to 5 years. In the visa unveiled in May 2017, the government announced that applicants would be able to seek a 3-year visa for a fee of $5,000 or a 5-year visa for $10,000. That's Australian, obviously, with the opportunity for a single renewal for another 5 years at the same price. Migrant groups as well as migration experts called into question the very high fee for the visa. I don't know if many migrants will be keen on the visa for their parents, but I certainly won't suggest anyone go for it. Just doesn't make sense to pay such exorbitant visa fee, said Juha Bajwa, a migration agent in Melbourne. You can guess which group he represents. And that's not South African whites. Okay. Headline: New sponsorship framework. With the new bill passed by the federal parliament that was introduced in 2016, a sponsorship framework has been put in place under which migrants wanting to sponsor their parents will act as financial guarantors and are legally required to any debt to taxpayers as a result of a medical emergency. Now, this is a huge shift in the old parental visa scheme. In the old parental visa scheme, you could get your parents over, and they could be part of the Australian social system. That's totally changed now. Okay, this guy goes on to say this new visa will ensure family reunions are possible for many migrant families across Australia, while protecting taxpayers with strict guidelines to ensure all public health debts, including hospital and aged care fees, are recovered by the Australian government, Mr. Coleman said. So for kids who bring in their parents to Australia, they are now liable for any health and related costs of the family that they bring over. Coleman goes on to say, we've covered that. But Mr. Bajwa says the much cheaper visitor visas that allows parents to live in Australia for up to 2 years in a period of 3 years for a small fraction of the new visa's cost do not have such cumbersome requirements. But hey, that's 2 years, that's not a long time. Mr. Bajwa went on to say, he's this migration guy who obviously represents people from the Middle East, let's be quite frank. Anyway, he says, the high fee isn't the only issue. There's a mandatory requirement for private health insurance from an Australian provider, and in case the parents incur a health debt, the sponsoring children are legally obligated to pay it back despite paying such a huge fee. Whereas in the normal visitor visas, there is no such provision. The new sponsorship framework also creates a 2-step application process that involves an assessment of the sponsor, and once approved, then only a visa application can be lodged. The arrangement is primarily aimed at safeguarding vulnerable family members, particularly children and married partners, from their violent sponsors. That doesn't make any sense to me, but anyway. There's a related article which I will read to you. Okay, this is the headline here is New Parental Visa, Blackmail and Deceit, says the visa campaigner. And the subheadline is the high cost of the new parental visa has left out those who campaigned for it, and they are now disappointed. Okay, the Turnbull government revealed a new parental visa on Wednesday that would allow parents or migrants to stay in Australia for up to a decade. However, the high cost of these visas is a concern for many migrants who say the visa in its current form will be unaffordable. Now, I just want to check something here. Okay, so let's get this in context. What I'm talking about here is the old parental visa. And what's happened is that the government, in that piece that I spoke about earlier, have actually tightened down on parental visas. And I'm only going to read the next paragraph in this because this old visa is no longer relevant. But you can see how the fees related to bringing your parents over and letting them stay with you here in Australia have just gone through the roof. Okay. The crucial comment in this particular statement is that how many of us can afford to pay $10,000 in visa fees and then also add insurance premiums? It is simply unaffordable, said Adelaide resident Arvin Dougal, who spearheaded a campaign for the long-stay parental visa. Now, that visa, which came out in 2017, this is about 18 months ago, was for 10 years for $10,000. It's now 5 years for $10,000. Not good. Anyway, look, I'll leave it at that. You can go and Google about the new parental visa in Australia. It's hot off the press. It's just happening right now. Please remember to subscribe to be kept informed, and I'll see you guys Sunday night with my guests. Take care, guys. Bye.